The rain battered the windshield as Marcus Tate gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles pale against his dark skin, the wipers barely keeping up with the storm. He'd driven 800 miles from Chicago to his childhood home in Syracuse, New York, chasing a fresh start after his heart was shattered. But nothing could have prepared him for the sight waiting at the end of this road. Marcus pulled into the gravel driveway of the old Victorian house, its peeling paint and sagging porch a mirror of his own exhaustion. At 28, he felt like he'd lived a lifetime already. His breakup with Julian had gutted him, leaving him raw and rootless. The house was supposed to be his refuge, a place to rebuild with his younger brother, Devin, who'd been living there alone since their mom passed 2 years ago. Marcus hadn't called ahead. He wanted the surprise of showing up, of collapsing into the familiar chaos of sibling banter. But as he stepped onto the porch, suitcase in hand, the door swung open, and his breath caught like a hook in his chest. Julian stood there, his ex, the man who'd walked out on him 6 months ago without a backward glance. His dark hair was longer now, curling at the nape of his neck, and his brown eyes widened in shock. "Marcus!" Julian's voice trembled, a sound that used to melt Marcus but now felt like a blade. "What the hell are you doing here?" Marcus demanded, his voice low, dangerous. Rain dripped from his jacket, pooling on the worn floorboards. Before Julian could answer, Devin appeared behind him, his lanky frame filling the doorway. At 25, Devin was all sharp angles and easy charm, but his face was tight with guilt. "Marcus, man, I didn't know you were coming. We need to talk." Marcus's gaze flicked between them, his heart pounding as the pieces clicked together. Julian wasn't just visiting. The way he stood close to Devin, the way Devin's hand hovered near Julian's arm, it was intimate, familiar. Marcus's suitcase hit the floor with a thud. "You're kidding me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You're with him now?" The room spun as Marcus tried to process the betrayal. Julian, the man he'd loved for 3 years, who'd left him with nothing but a note saying, "I can't do this anymore," was now living in his house. With his brother. The air felt too thick to breathe, the walls of the old house closing in. Marcus wanted to scream, to run, but his feet were rooted to the spot. "Marcus, it's not what you think," Julian started, stepping forward, his hands raised like he could calm the storm brewing in Marcus's chest. "Not what I think?" Marcus laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You left me, Julian. You broke me, and now you're here, shacked up with my brother? Explain that." Devin stepped in, his voice softer, pleading. "It just happened. After you left Chicago, Julian showed up here a few months ago. He was a mess, Marcus. We got to talking and what? You decided to take my ex for a spin." Marcus's voice cracked, his anger masking the hurt threatening to spill over. He looked at Julian, searching for the man he'd once planned a future with. The late-night talks about moving to the West Coast, the whispered promises in the dark. They all felt like lies now. Julian's eyes glistened, but he didn't look away. "I didn't plan this. I was lost after we ended. I came here looking for you, but you were gone." Devin was kind. He listened. Marcus clenched his fists, the urge to punch something, anything, surging through him. "Kind? He's my brother, Julian. My family." The word felt heavy, loaded with years of loyalty and shared grief. Devin had been there through their mom's cancer, through the late-night vigils and the funeral. They'd promised to always have each other's backs. And now this. "I'm sorry," Devin said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I swear." Marcus shook his head, unable to look at either of them. He grabbed his suitcase and turned back toward the rain-soaked porch. "I need air," he muttered, stepping out into the storm. The cold bit at his skin, but it was nothing compared to the ache in his chest. He'd come home to heal, but instead he'd walked into a fresh wound. The next morning, Marcus woke on the lumpy couch in the living room, his neck stiff and his heart heavier than the night before. He hadn't slept much, the sound of rain and his own racing thoughts keeping him awake. The house smelled of coffee and memories, his mom's pancakes, Devon's old mixtapes blaring from the basement. But now, those memories were tainted by the image of Julian and Devon together. He found them in the kitchen, moving around each other with an ease that made Marcus's stomach twist. Julian was flipping pancakes, his sleeves rolled up, while Devon chopped fruit at the counter. It was domestic, intimate, and it made Marcus feel like an intruder in his own home. "We need to figure this out," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the quiet. Both men froze, turning to face him. Julian set down the spatula, his expression cautious. "I'll leave," Julian offered quickly. "I don't want to make this harder for you." Marcus snorted. "You already did." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure he wanted Julian to go. The thought of him disappearing again, of losing him completely, stirred something painful in Marcus's chest. He hated himself for it. Devon stepped forward, his hands stuffed in his pockets. "Marcus, I know I messed up, but I care about him, and I care about you. Can we just talk? Like we used to?" Marcus wanted to say no, to walk away and never look back. But this was his home, his family, and despite everything, he couldn't just erase them. "Fine," he said finally, his voice tight, "but don't expect me to play nice." Over the next week, the house became a battleground of unspoken tension. Marcus took the guest room, avoiding Julian and Devon as much as he could. But the small house made it impossible to escape entirely. He'd catch glimpses of them, Julian laughing at one of Devon's terrible jokes, Devon brushing a hand against Julian's back. Each moment was a knife twist, a reminder of what Marcus had lost. Yet, there were moments that confused him. Julian would linger in the hallway, his eyes searching Marcus's face like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Once, when Devon was at work, Julian brought Marcus a cup of coffee, setting it on the table without a word. Their fingers brushed as Marcus took the mug, and the brief contact sent a jolt through him, rekindling feelings he thought he'd buried. One night, unable to sleep, Marcus wandered onto the back porch, where Julian was sitting, staring at the stars. The silence between them was heavy, but Julian broke it first. "I never stopped loving you," he said softly, his voice barely carrying over the crickets. "I left because I was scared of how much I felt, of messing it up." Marcus's throat tightened. He wanted to believe it, wanted to fall back into the warmth of Julian's words. But the betrayal was too fresh, too raw. "You don't get to say that now," he said, his voice shaking. "Not after everything." Julian nodded, his eyes glistening. "I know, but I need you to know it's the truth." Marcus turned away, his heart at war with itself. He'd come home to escape his pain, but instead he was forced to face it head-on. And somewhere, deep down, he knew this wasn't just about Julian and Devon. It was about him, about what he wanted, what he was willing to fight for, and whether he could forgive the two people who'd hurt him most. The Syracuse autumn crept in, painting the trees in fiery hues that mirrored the tension in the Tate household. Marcus spent his days fixing up the house, patching the leaky roof, repainting the porch, anything to keep his hands busy and his mind off the ache in his chest. But no amount of manual labor could drown out the sound of Julian's laughter from the kitchen or the soft murmur of Devon's voice late at night. Marcus had taken to morning runs through the neighborhood, the crisp air burning his lungs as he tried to outrun his thoughts. At 28, he was fit, his body lean from years of discipline, but his heart felt heavy, weighed down by betrayal and unspoken questions. Why had Julian left him in Chicago? And how had he ended up with Devon, of all people? The answers eluded him, and every interaction with the two men only deepened the mystery. One afternoon, while sanding down a warped floorboard in the living room, Marcus overheard a conversation that stopped him cold. Devon and Julian were in the kitchen, their voices low but clear through the thin walls. "I don't know how to fix this," Devon said, his tone heavy with frustration. "He's my brother, Jules. I can't lose him." Julian's response was softer, tinged with regret. "I never wanted to come between you two. Maybe I should just go." Marcus's grip tightened on the sandpaper, his knuckles whitening. The thought of Julian leaving again sent a pang through him, one he didn't want to acknowledge. He stood, brushing sawdust from his jeans, and walked into the kitchen, his presence silencing them both. Julian's eyes met his, and for a moment, Marcus saw the man he'd fallen in love with, vulnerable, earnest, and painfully human. "Don't," Marcus said, his voice rough. "Don't leave. Not yet." He didn't know why he said it, only that the idea of Julian vanishing again felt like losing a piece of himself. Devon looked between them, his expression a mix of relief and unease. "Marcus, I know this is messed up, but we didn't plan it. It just happened." Marcus wanted to laugh at the cliché, but the hurt was too raw. "Things don't just happen, Devon. You made a choice. Both of you." He turned to Julian, his voice softening despite himself. "Why didn't you tell me you were struggling? Why didn't you fight for us?" Julian's shoulders slumped, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. At 27, he carried a quiet intensity, his Latino heritage evident in the warmth of his skin and the depth of his eyes. "I was scared," he admitted. "I felt like I was drowning in Chicago, in us. I thought leaving was the only way to breathe." Marcus's chest tightened. He remembered the late nights in their cramped Chicago apartment, the way Julian's smile had started to fade, the way their arguments had grown sharper. He'd thought it was just a rough patch, something they'd work through, but Julian had walked away instead. "And you?" Marcus turned to Devon, his voice steady but laced with pain. "You knew what he meant to me. How could you?" Devon ran a hand through his tight curls, his face etched with guilt. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. He showed up here broken, Marcus. I was just trying to help. And then I don't know. I fell for him." The words hit like a punch, but Marcus forced himself to stay calm. He looked at Julian, searching for something, anything that could make sense of this. "Do you love him?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Julian hesitated, his eyes flickering with conflict. "I care about him," he said finally. "But it's not the same. Not like it was with you." The admission hung in the air, heavy and fragile. Marcus wanted to hate them both, to walk away and never look back. But there was something in Julian's voice, a raw honesty that tugged at the part of him that still loved him. And Devon, his little brother, the kid he protected through every storm, was looking at him with a desperation Marcus hadn't seen since their mom's funeral. "I need time," Marcus said, his voice thick. "I can't do this right now." He walked out, leaving them in the kitchen, the weight of their words trailing behind him. That evening, Marcus found himself at a local bar, nursing a beer and trying to make sense of his tangled emotions. The place was a dive, all sticky floors and neon signs, but it was better than the suffocating tension at home. He was halfway through his second drink when a stranger slid onto the stool beside him. "Rough day?" the man asked, his voice warm and lightly accented. Marcus glanced over, taking in the man's easy smile and dark eyes. He was in his early 30s with a lean build and a hint of stubble. "You could say that," Marcus muttered, not in the mood for small talk. "I'm Raphael," the man said, undeterred. "And you look like someone who needs to vent." Marcus snorted, but something about Raphael's openness made him relax. Over the next hour, he found himself spilling the story. Not all of it, but enough. The breakup, the move, the shock of finding Julian with Devon. Raphael listened, his expression thoughtful, never interrupting. "Sounds like you're caught in a love triangle with your own family," Raphael said when Marcus finished, his tone light but not mocking. "That's some heavy stuff." Marcus laughed despite himself, the sound surprising him. "Yeah, heavy's one way to put it." Raphael leaned closer, his voice dropping. "You know, sometimes the only way through is to face it head-on. Figure out what you want, not what they expect you to feel." The words stuck with Marcus as he drove home that night. What did he want? Forgiveness? Revenge? Or something else entirely? When he walked into the house, he found Julian alone in the living room, flipping through an old photo album. The sight of him, surrounded by memories of their family, softened something in Marcus. "Those were good times," Julian said quietly, pointing to a photo of Marcus and Devon as kids, grinning in their mom's garden. "I miss that." Marcus sat beside him, the distance between them both physical and emotional. "I miss it too," he admitted, "but I don't know how to get back there." Julian looked at him, his eyes searching. "Maybe we don't go back. Maybe we find something new." The words lingered, a fragile bridge between their past and an uncertain future. Marcus didn't have an answer, but for the first time since he'd arrived, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way through this mess, one that didn't end in more heartbreak. The weeks blurred into a strange rhythm, the Tate house a pressure cooker of emotions. Marcus threw himself into fixing the place up, hammering nails and painting walls as if he could rebuild his heart with every stroke. But the quiet moments, when he caught Julian's gaze lingering too long or saw Devon's guilt-ridden glances, reminded him that some things couldn't be fixed with a toolbox. One crisp October morning, Marcus was in the backyard, raking leaves into a pile, when Devon joined him. At 25, Devon had their mom's eyes, warm, expressive, and impossible to lie to. "Can we talk?" Devon asked, kicking at a stray leaf. Marcus didn't stop raking. "What's there to say? You're with my ex. I'm trying to deal." Devon sighed, shoving his hands in his jacket pockets. "I know I screwed up, but I need you to understand. I didn't do this to hurt you." Julian was a wreck when he showed up. He was sleeping on friends' couches, barely eating. I couldn't just turn him away. Marcus paused, his grip tightening on the rake. "So you took him in, and then what?" "Fell in love." The words tasted bitter, but he needed to hear it. Devon hesitated, his jaw tight. "Yeah, I did. But it's not what you had with him. I know that." The admission stung, but it also clarified something for Marcus. Devon wasn't the villain here, just a guy caught up in his own heart. Marcus dropped the rake, wiping sweat from his brow. "You should have told me," he said finally. "The second it started, you should have called." "I know," Devon said, his voice breaking. "I was scared you'd hate me." Marcus looked at his brother, the kid who'd followed him around as a child, who'd cried in his arms when their mom died. "I don't hate you," he said, the words heavy but true. "I'm just lost." Devon nodded, his eyes glistening. "Can we fix this? You and me?" Marcus didn't have an answer, but he clapped a hand on Devon's shoulder, a small gesture that felt like a start. They worked in silence after that, raking leaves side by side, the crunch of their footsteps a fragile truce. Later that week, Marcus ran into Raphael again at the local coffee shop. Raphael was sketching in a notebook, his dark hair falling into his eyes as he worked. At 32, he had a quiet confidence that drew Marcus in, a steadiness that felt like an anchor in the storm of his life. "Back for more bad coffee?" Raphael teased, closing his notebook. Marcus grinned, the first real smile he'd felt in days. Maybe I'm here for the company. They talked for hours, the conversation flowing easily from art to music to the mess of Marcus's home life. Raphael was a graphic designer, originally from Miami, who'd moved to Syracuse for a quieter life. His openness was disarming, and Marcus found himself sharing more than he'd intended. About Julian, about Devin, about the ache that wouldn't go away. "You're carrying a lot," Raphael said, his voice gentle. "But you're stronger than you think. You're still here, still fighting." Marcus looked down at his coffee, his throat tight. "I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm falling apart." Raphael reached across the table, his hand resting lightly on Marcus's. The touch was brief but electric, sending a warmth through Marcus that he hadn't felt in months. "You're not falling apart," Raphael said. "You're just rebuilding." That night, Marcus lay awake, Raphael's words echoing in his mind. He thought of Julian, of the love they'd shared and the pain of its end. He thought of Devin, his brother, who'd made a mistake but was still family. And he thought of Raphael, a stranger who'd somehow seen him more clearly than anyone else. The next day, Julian cornered Marcus in the garage, where he was sorting through old tools. The air smelled of oil and dust, and Julian's presence felt like an intrusion. "We need to talk," Julian said, his voice steady but nervous. Marcus set down a wrench, bracing himself. "Go ahead." Julian took a deep breath, his hands twisting together. "I messed up, Marcus. I know that. But I need you to know why I left Chicago. It wasn't just about us. I was dealing with stuff. My family, they cut me off when I came out. I felt like I was failing you, failing myself. I ran because I didn't know how to stay." Marcus's anger softened, replaced by a pang of empathy. He knew about Julian's family, the way they'd rejected him when he came out as gay. But Julian had never let him in, never shared the depth of that pain. "You should have told me," Marcus said, his voice quieter now. "I would have helped you through it." "I know," Julian said, his eyes glistening. "I see that now. And being here with Devin, it's not what I thought it would be. I care about him, but I'm not in love with him. Not the way I was with you." The words hit Marcus like a wave, stirring up emotions he'd tried to bury. He wanted to reach out, to pull Julian close and erase the months of distance between them. But the betrayal still lingered, a shadow he couldn't shake. "What do you want from me, Julian?" he asked, his voice raw. "I don't know," Julian admitted. I don't want to lose you completely." Marcus didn't respond, the weight of Julian's words settling over him. He turned back to the tools, needing something to ground him. But as he worked, he couldn't stop thinking about what Julian had said, and what it meant for all of them. November arrived, bringing a chill that seeped into the Tate house. Marcus had settled into a fragile routine, splitting his time between home repairs and coffee shop conversations with Raphael. The latter had become a lifeline, a reminder that there was a world beyond the tangled mess of his home life. But the tension with Julian and Devin remained, a constant undercurrent that threatened to pull him under. One evening, Marcus returned home to find Julian and Devin arguing in the living room. Their voices were low but heated, and Marcus paused in the hallway, unnoticed. "You can't keep pretending this doesn't affect him," Devin said, his tone sharp. "He's my brother, Jules. I see the way you look at him." Julian's voice was quieter, strained. "I'm not pretending. I'm trying to figure out what's right. For all of us." Marcus stepped into the room, his presence cutting through their argument like a knife. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. Devin turned, his face a mix of frustration and relief. "We're trying to sort this out, Marcus. I know you're still mad, but we need to figure out how to live here, together." Julian looked at Marcus, his eyes pleading. "I don't want to keep hurting you." If you want me to leave, I will. Marcus's instinct was to say yes, to cut Julian out and move on. But the thought of him gone, really gone, made his chest ache. He thought of Raphael's words about figuring out what he wanted. I don't know what I want, he admitted, his voice raw. But I don't want you to go. Not yet. Devon's shoulders relaxed slightly, but Julian's expression remained guarded. Then what do we do? Julian asked. Marcus didn't have an answer, but he knew they couldn't keep circling the same wounds. We talk, he said finally. No more secrets. No more hiding. Over the next few days, the three of them began to navigate a tentative truce. They ate meals together, the conversations stilted but honest. Marcus learned more about Julian's struggles, how his family's rejection had left him adrift, how he'd come to Syracuse hoping to find Marcus, only to find Devon instead. Devon, in turn, opened up about his own loneliness, how Julian's arrival had filled a void he hadn't realized was there. It wasn't easy. Marcus still flinched at the sight of Julian and Devon together, their casual touches a reminder of his own loss. But he also saw the cracks in their relationship, Julian's hesitation, Devon's insecurity. They weren't the perfect couple Marcus had imagined. They were two people trying to make sense of their own pain. One night, Marcus and Julian ended up on the rooftop, a bottle of wine between them. The city skyline sparkled in the distance, and the cool air carried a hint of winter. Julian leaned back, his hands braced against the ledge, and Marcus couldn't help but notice the way his profile caught the light. Beautiful, familiar, and still so painful. Do you ever think about what could have been? Julian asked, his voice soft. If I hadn't left? Marcus took a sip of wine, letting the question settle. Every day, he said honestly. But I can't live in the past. And neither can you. Julian nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. I'm trying to figure out who I am without you, without Devon. It's harder than I thought. Marcus's heart twisted, but he didn't look away. You're stronger than you think, he said, echoing Raphael's words. You just have to believe it. Julian turned to him, their eyes locking. For a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them, the air charged with unspoken possibilities. Marcus's hand brushed against Julian's, a fleeting touch that sent a spark through him. He pulled back, unsure, but the moment lingered, a promise of something neither of them was ready to name. The next day, Marcus met Raphael at a local art gallery, where Raphael was showcasing some of his work. The space was filled with vibrant colors and bold lines, each piece a reflection of Raphael's passion. Marcus felt a pull toward him, a connection that was both new and comforting. You're good at this, Marcus said, gesturing to a painting of a stormy sea. It feels alive. Raphael smiled, his eyes crinkling. Thanks. That's how I process things. The chaos, the beauty, all of it. Marcus envied that clarity, that ability to channel pain into something tangible. I wish I could do that, he admitted. I'm just stuck. Raphael stepped closer, his voice low. You're not stuck. You're just in the middle of your story. The good part's coming. Marcus wanted to believe him, but the weight of his home life pressed against him. He thought of Julian's confession on the rooftop, of Devon's efforts to rebuild their bond. He was caught between the past and the present, between forgiveness and letting go. As they left the gallery, Raphael's hand brushed against Marcus's, and this time, Marcus didn't pull away. The touch was a small thing, but it felt like a step toward something new, a possibility he hadn't dared to consider until now. Winter settled over Syracuse, blanketing the city in snow and quieting the Tate household. Marcus had found a fragile balance, navigating the tension with Julian and Devon while exploring the spark with Raphael. But as Christmas approached, the weight of the season, the memories of family, of loss, of love, brought everything to a head. One evening, Marcus came home to find Julian packing a bag in the guest room. The sight stopped him cold. "You're leaving?" he asked, his voice sharper than he intended. Julian paused, a sweater half folded in his hands. "I think it's for the best," he said quietly. "I'm causing too much pain. For you, for Devon." Marcus's chest tightened. He'd spent weeks wrestling with his feelings, torn between anger and longing. But now, faced with Julian's departure, he realized he wasn't ready to let go. "Don't," he said, stepping closer. "Not like this." Julian looked up, his eyes searching Marcus's face. "What do you want, Marcus? I need to hear it." The question hung between them, heavy with months of unspoken truths. Marcus took a deep breath, his voice steady despite the storm inside. "I want you to stay, not because of Devon, not because of the past, because I still care about you, and I think we need to figure out what that means." Julian's breath hitched, his hands dropping the sweater. "And Devon." Marcus's jaw tightened. "He's my brother. I love him, but it's separate. We need to sort it out. Just you and me." Julian nodded, his eyes glistening. "Okay," he whispered. "Let's try." The next day, Marcus sat Devon down in the kitchen, the air thick with the scent of coffee and unresolved tension. "We need to talk about Julian," Marcus said, his voice firm but not unkind. Devon's face fell, but he nodded. "I know. I've seen the way he looks at you. It's not the same with me." Marcus's heart ached for his brother, for the pain in his eyes. "I'm not trying to take him from you," he said, "but I need to figure out what's left between us. And I need you to be okay with that." Devon swallowed hard, his hands clenched on the table. "I want you to be happy, Marcus. Both of you. If that means letting go, I'll do it." The words were a gift, one Marcus hadn't expected. He reached across the table, gripping Devon's hand. "You're still my brother," he said. "That doesn't change." Devon managed a small smile, though it was tinged with sadness. "Yeah, I know." Over the next week, Marcus and Julian began to rebuild one careful step at a time. They really talked, about the pain of their breakup, the mistakes they'd both made, the hopes they still carried. It wasn't easy. Trust was a fragile thing, and the shadow of Devon's feelings lingered. But there was a spark between them, a flicker of the love they'd once shared, and Marcus held onto it like a lifeline. Raphael, too, remained a presence in Marcus's life. They met for coffee, for walks through the snowy park, their connection deepening with every conversation. Raphael was patient, never pushing, but his warmth and honesty challenged Marcus to confront his own heart. One night, as they stood on a rooftop overlooking the city, Raphael took Marcus's hand, his touch steady and sure. "You deserve to be happy," Raphael said, his voice soft but firm. "Whatever that looks like." Marcus looked at him, the city lights reflecting in Raphael's eyes. He thought of Julian, of the love they were trying to salvage. He thought of Devon, of the bond they'd fought to preserve. And he thought of himself, of the man he was becoming through all this pain and healing. "I'm trying," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm trying to figure it out." Raphael smiled, squeezing his hand. "That's all anyone can do." On Christmas Eve, the Tate house was quiet, the tension replaced by a tentative peace. Marcus, Julian, and Devon sat around the dining table, a small tree twinkling in the corner. They'd cooked together, a clumsy but heartfelt effort, and the air was filled with the scent of roasted vegetables and their mom's old recipes. As they ate, Marcus looked at the two men who'd shaped so much of his life. Devon, his brother, who'd made mistakes but loved fiercely. Julian, his first love, who'd broken his heart but was trying to mend it. And in the back of his mind was Raphael, a new possibility, a reminder that love could come in unexpected forms. To family, Marcus said, raising his glass, his voice steady. And to starting over. Devin and Julian raised their glasses, their smiles cautious but genuine. To starting over, they echoed. As the snow fell outside, Marcus felt a weight lift. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in months, he felt ready to walk it. Love, he realized, wasn't about erasing the past or avoiding pain. It was about facing it, forgiving it, and finding a way forward, together or apart, but always with hope.